this guy's like you're like court. And that's not what God had in mind here. See, and Tasha talked about it here last week. Judges are more like a hero. Another way we can think about them is like a spiritual leader or a warrior or even a military leader. And like Deborah, Gideon really wouldn't be your first choice for someone who has those qualities. Deborah was a woman, and in that time, like she was saying, you wouldn't really choose someone like that to lead your army or tell the generals what to do. Gideon, we find out, is very low on the totem pole guy. He feels like he's one of the lowest of the low, and nobody would want to listen to him. Yeah, and he is quite hesitant. He has a lot of excuses. He has very little faith and almost no trust in God at the beginning. And like I mentioned before, I didn't really know anything about Gideon. We know about the Gideons, right? We've heard of them. These people back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they got together. I think it was a couple of guys. They were salesmen. And they really wanted to do something for the Lord. And, they prayed. And what came to mind was the name Gideon. And they set out to have a mission to distribute God's word. And they ended up just spreading Bibles wherever they could. And they would go to hotels. And that was their mission. And the name Gideon is very applied to them because they were just a couple of guys. As you can tell, they affected such huge change. I was speaking with Pastor Rich here. Over in England, at some of the hotels they have Gideon Bibles. They're international. When I was at college, I got one of those little green Bibles. They have Psalms, Proverbs, and then the whole New Testament. I had that with me for years. I would keep it in my car in case I ever needed to hand it out to somebody. But that was their mission. That's how Gideon inspired them. We're not going to hear quite so much about that part of it this time. We're really going to be focusing more on how Gideon gets to this point. So, like I said, very excited. And so when we think about Gideon and we think about a judge and he's going to be a hero, what's the story going to start out like? I remember as a kid when I was reading stories, you'd once upon a time, then maybe Gideon something. Or it was a sunny afternoon one day, and then Gideon decided to something. Or maybe even there once was a brave man, noble. His name was Gideon. We could go real new school with this. A long time ago in a galaxy or maybe a land far, far away. Well, let's see how it starts out here. Go to Judges chapter 6, verse 1. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. It's not how I would start a story. It's depressing and it's sad. I don't understand what's going on here. But this is very characteristic of Israel. Throughout the whole Old Testament, really, they go through this where they do something horrible and then something bad happens to them, and they just do this over and over again. Why? Now, before we even get to Gideon, I'd love to just go right to Gideon, but I really feel like we need to get some context and some history here. It's really important to set up why they got to where they are, why Gideon is where we find him at, and there's some really nice correlations where God kind of nods to the things of the past. And it's going to be really great. There's a lot of verses here, so let's try and get through them here. So we actually start out after Deborah. There was 40 years of peace that the Israelites got to experience. God's like, hey, you accomplished these things with me. That's great. Take a break. just be with me. And they were doing them great for 40 years. And then they messed up. They messed up. Right after 40 years, God continues here in chapter 2 through 5, or verse 2 through 5. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and the other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel. Neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Now, I have a map up here, and it might be kind of hard to see, but basically this colored section right here is where Israel is at. I wish I had it zoomed out a little more. I couldn't really do that, but basically the Midianites here are on the very southern tip here, and then basically everywhere around Israel is just enemies. They're just full of enemies, and they're in this constant state of either being invaded by them or fighting them out, or God sending them away. It's constant. They're just surrounded by this, and this is no different. And if you think about it, this is a really major punishment. I mean, we can't just blow past this. I mean, the Midianites are described as locusts. Really get a picture of that, and I actually got some here. These little buggers get into swarms like this. I dare you to count them. You're not going to be able to. You can hardly see through to the other side. And when they're done doing what they're doing, they leave nothing behind. They are a plague. And this happens for 7 years to Israel. I mean, if you think about it, Israelites are farming to feed their enemies. I mean, they're probably dying of starvation or very close to it. They're probably even getting killed along the way. And it's happening for 7 years. So what do the Israelites do? Here in verse 6, Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. They were put in a state of fear. So much fear. And this idea of fear is just a really common thing with Gideon. It's a real central theme here that God is trying to tackle. Fear rules their lives, it affects their choices. And what we're going to see here soon is that a lot of it is self-inflicted. So they cry out, and God actually has them right where he wants them. See, he doesn't want them to be in despair. It's not his goal. He has them calling to him. They're focused on the Lord again, but why weren't they doing this before? They had 40 years of peace. And they did evil. What was it? Well, here in verses 7 through 10, we find out. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet. I will admit this prophet is unnamed. Just thought I'd mention that. It's kind of an interesting one. But and this prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all of your oppressors. I drove them out before you, and I gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me." This didn't come out of nowhere. The prophet's basically rehashing what Joshua was talking about in chapter 23 and 24, before they even went into the land. Now, there's a lot going to go on here. I really want to touch on these two chapters, but there's so much. We could go through them for a long time, but you're going to see I'm going to kind of skip through a little bit. We're going to hit some key points. Joshua really fleshes out what God has done for them, what he wants them to do, and what happens when you disobey that. And as I said, I would encourage you guys, maybe after this, read through those. I mean, he basically spelled it out for them. So we'll start first here, Joshua 23, verses 6 through 8. Be very strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, without turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them. You are to hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. Okay, later in verse 15. But just as all the good things the Lord your God has promised you have come to you, so he will bring on you all the evil things he has threatened. And then verse 16. If you violate the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you will quickly perish from the good land he has given you. Joshua is laying it out. This is a warning. He's giving them boundaries and expectations. The people saw what happened when you disobey God. There was a reason they had to walk through the desert for 40 years. These guys were whining the whole time. They were complaining. They weren't trusting God. There were scores of dead Israelites because they would worship a false idol, the golden calf. There were rebellious Israelites that were causing problems. And God showed them he means business. He is true to his word. They are his chosen people. And he saved them from Egypt, and he brought them out and took them to the promised land, the one he promised to them. He established a covenant with his people that started all the way back with Abraham. And what's interesting here in Joshua 24 is that the people of God actually make him a promise. I thought that was really interesting. They make their own covenant with him. And where they do this part's going to tie in later, so keep your listening ears out, because there's this real interesting connection. So it's going to tie into Gideon and the special guest that he has that shows up. So let's see what his people promise him. Okay. So Joshua says in chapter 24, verses 14 to 16, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And then the people answered, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods." And then over in verse 18, they agree again, saying also, "We too will serve the Lord because he is our God." And it sounds good, right? It's very simple agreements. They acknowledge what God did for them. They love that. They're totally on board. And so they're choosing to disregard these idols and these false gods. But Joshua's going to tell them again. You know, it's like a parent. Sometimes you got to say things a few times. But God isn't playing. And he's not going to put up with these other gods, these fake idols. He continues, verse 19 to 22. Joshua said to his people, "You are not able to serve the Lord. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you." But the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." And Joshua said, "You are a witness against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve the Lord." "Yes, we are witnesses," they replied. They're locked in. They are all for this. They know who they wish to serve, and they go all in for God. So Joshua is about to record this. Now pay attention to how he records this, and see if you can pick it up later. Verses 25 to 27. "Now on that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up under an oak near the place of the Lord. See, he said to all people, 'This stone will be a witness against us. If it has heard all the words the Lord has said to us, it will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God.'" So now we know what was the evil in the eyes of the Lord. These guys are worshiping false idols. They're worshiping false gods. They didn't listen. We're generations past now, and they're just deep into this. He brought them out of Egypt because they're suffering. They called and cried out to him. This is his promised people. He showed his awesomeness to them, all his wonders. And he brought them into the land, and he lives now. And their families before, they swore it. They said, yeah, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And now we're generations past, and they did. Now, they didn't totally disregard God. I want to point this out. It's not like they're like, oh, God doesn't exist now. That's not how it worked. What they did, something really weird, is that they would take these other gods and they would kind of blend it in together with the Lord. It's called Jewish syncretism. They think these other gods worked with the Lord and like somehow were together. This is what happens when you stray away from what you know, when you start bringing other things in. It gets confusing and you just lose sight of what's true. Now, I'm not excusing the evil at all. I'm just saying this is just kind of what they did. So, part of this happened because of their disobedience, and he brought it up. Joshua warned them about it. They were supposed to wipe out the people of the promised land. One of these was the reason, because it was going to lead them to this. Let's go back to that warning here. Joshua chapter 23, verses 12 to 13. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out the nations before you. Sound interesting? What happened? Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. They were told to get rid of these people. They were told not to marry the women. And the reason being is that, I mean, if you imagine, when you choose to marry somebody, you're going to take on a lot of the baggage, right? And when they were marrying these women, they brought their gods with them, their idols. And just over time, what ends up happening is it just gets incorporated in. And it's a real problem, the beliefs that some of these idols and gods had. A lot of them involved sexual immorality. Some of them even involved child sacrifice. This was an unbelievable thing, and God didn't want any part of this. So we see because of their sin and their disobedience, God brought the Midianites in to teach them a lesson for 7 years. And it kind of seems like God's acting like the mean parent here, you know. Hey, you know, if you want to live like that, fine. You know, this is the consequence. You know, and parents, we do this, right? We do. I mean, think about it. You know, your child goes up to the stove. The stove's on. For some reason, they get it in their head, let's go touch that hot stove. So you grab their hand and you say, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Stop it. What are you going to do? Well, you want them to learn the lesson, right? You can keep telling them no. They're obviously not listening. So what do, parents? You take a step back. All right. Go on. See what happens. What inevitably happens is they suffer the consequence, don't they? No, we don't do this because we want them to experience pain. We don't. We don't want to see them in despair. We don't want them to hurt. But we want them to learn the lesson. And hopefully what that lesson is that they learn is that when we tell them, hey, don't do that. Trust me. I know. I don't want you to hurt. Believe me. Have faith in me. I want good for you. And that, I mean, it just goes right back to verse 6 here. When they cry out to the Lord for help, that's exactly what he wanted. It was a hard lesson to learn. He wanted his people to turn back to him and rely on him. Sometimes it seems like God wants us to experience these hard times so that eventually we don't have anywhere else to turn to. Sometimes you got to get rid of everything else that we think that we need first. And unfortunately, sometimes God's last on the list. but he's on the list at least. So he wants our attention. So now they're in this state of fear, like I mentioned before. So much so that they're hiding in caves, up on mountain clefts, in strongholds that they've built to try and save themselves. And it's actually with this in mind that we find Gideon. Now, as we go through the story, and I mentioned this before, I really want to focus more right now on the character of Gideon. I think it's really important. We know that he's going to be this great leader and he's going to accomplish a lot of things with God. But I think it's really important to start off with where he started at and where God moves him to. So we find him in a winepress threshing wheat. Now, hopefully that sounds a little odd to you. First of all, we don't do this. This isn't how things go anymore. So it might sound weird to you, but believe it or not, it actually sounded weird to people back in that time too. You don't thresh wheat in a wine press. It's absurd. It's an exercise in futility. See, threshing wheat, what you would do is you'd gather your wheat together, you'd crush it up, you'd start breaking loose what is the chaff around the grain, and you would go up to like a hill, someplace higher where there's a lot of wind, and you would scoop up the wheat and you'd toss it up in the air, and then the chaff would blow away, and what falls down would be the grain, and you would separate the chaff from the grain. So you're not getting everything mixed up. That's just how it worked. It just made sense to everybody. And a wine press, obviously not for threshing wheat, but I think I have a picture of it up here. This is one possible wine press. So what you would do is you would get like your grapes or your fruit and you would crush it around the outside here, and then the liquid would flow into the middle and gather, and that's where you would get the juice to make the wine. But this has to be really low. You're not up on a hill doing this. And it's for good reason. There's no wind here. If you throw up the wheat, it's just going to fall right back down. It's an exercise in futility is what it is. But Gideon's doing this for a reason. Imagine you're up on that hill, throwing wheat around, and here come the Midianites going, hey, what's going on over there? That's some free food. Let's go get that. You're ringing the dinner bell for your enemy. So Gideon is cowering away in the winepress, trying to thresh wheat. He's in fear. He's scared. So, like I said, it's an exercise in futility, but I mean, if you think about it, in Gideon's mind, it's a lot better than losing your food, or even worse, losing your life. At least that's what's going on in his head. So our hero, our nation, Israel, is gripped with fear, and now God appears to him. And go to verses 11 and 12 in Judges 6. See, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abizrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." You all remember what I was saying, right, about Gideon here? This guy who's being a big scaredy cat, down in a winepress, hiding away, trying to thresh wheat. And it's not making a lot of sense to me. Mighty warrior. I don't know about you, but if I was to walk up to Gideon at this moment, I think I'd have some different names for him. Here's one. A fearful thresher. No. That's a little too on the nose. Maybe about the cowardly whiner. Because the wine never mind, it's fine. It's all right. No, God calls him mighty warrior. Why? Well, he's God. He sees the potential in Gideon for who he can be. Gideon is oblivious to this. He is not on that track. See, God's about to call him to do some amazing things through his power. But that's not what sticks to Gideon first. See, Gideon doesn't see the potential. In fact, we see that Gideon's got a whole lot of excuses and a whole lot of doubt. He's got a whole lot of reasons why he thinks there is no potential. But thank God, God is who he is, and he sees through all that nonsense. See, and I also find it interesting here. Are you guys paying attention? Where does the angel of the Lord appear at? Under the oak. Now, I'm not saying this is the same oak tree that Joshua put the rock under. But it's a real interesting contrast of what the Israelites promised to do and where God pops up later. It's almost like a reminder of like, hey, remember what we were talking about before? Well, here I am. See, it's one of God's ways to visually call him back to that covenant that Israel made with him. And unfortunately, as people, we're a lot harder at keeping our promises than God is. We know God is faithful, and he will keep his promises. Yeah. Now, God doesn't go back on his promises. He brings us back to him. And it's important to note here, who is this angel of the Lord? That's another one. And he actually shows up a lot of times here in the Old Testament. I think I have some things here. He shows up to Hagar in Genesis chapter 16. He shows up to Abraham as three men. That's a little interesting, isn't it? God showing up as three people. Shows up to three men in Genesis 18. He shows up to Abraham again when he was about to sacrifice his son Isaac, chapter 22. Jacob wrestles him in Genesis 32. That's Jacob's name, is he wrestles with God. He shows up to Moses in the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3. And in Joshua chapters 5 and 6 as the commander of the army of the Lord. See, in all these instances, the angel of the Lord, he presents himself. He speaks as if he is God. He has characteristics of God. A lot of times he says he is God. And it's so interesting because what's one of the things that a lot of people know is you don't see God. You can't see him. If you did, you would, I don't know, explode or something. You don't want to know what happens. But it's interesting because I think that leads us to believe that quite possibly that this is what we call a pre-incarnation of Christ. Because Christ is the physical image of God. And we have a word for it. It's called a Christophany. And again, with all this information, we think that's true. It's so interesting because even before God became a human to save us from our sins, he was living up to his name. Emmanuel, God with us. Another interesting point, the angel of the Lord popped up, we were talking about it. He shows up in a burning bush. He shows up as three people. He's some person wanted to wrestle Jacob. He's a commander of the army of the Lord. Gideon wasn't freaking out when this guy shows up. This guy, the angel of the Lord, is appearing as just like a normal person. And I think it's going to be for a real interesting thing we're going to see here. And so now just imagine Gideon thinks this random person's walking up to him, and he's sitting there like a weirdo, threshing wheat in a rye press, and this is the situation we're all in. Now, none of this registers with Gideon at first, and he doesn't even comment on this whole mighty warrior thing, on this title he's been given. Now, he does have a different thought, though. Here in verse 13, he says, "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." See, Gideon points out he doesn't see God. He's heard stories of the Lord. He grew up hearing about all the miraculous wonders that God did to bring his people out of Egypt. All the signs that were done, all the amazing things. He doesn't see any of that. This kind of leads me to think that maybe this is a reason why Israel started turning more to idols and false gods. See, when it comes to what we're experiencing and feeling, if we don't feel God's with us sometimes, or if anything is going our way, what do? We go somewhere else. It's not correct. It's not right. We should be patient. We should trust God. We know he doesn't want bad for us, but a lot of times we want to get our needs fulfilled any other way because we're impatient. And I know I've experienced this. I've experienced frustration with God, feeling like I was alone, that he wasn't there for me, or like I was being punished for something. Nothing was happening in my timeline, I know that. I always wondered when things would change. I would fret and I would worry. But instead of to choose to turn to God and just keep with him and know that he had a plan for me, I just ran away. And I had all the tools necessary too. I had the Word of God. I had other believers I could talk to. I could pray to him. There was a lot I could have done. Here the other day, I was just cleaning out my living room, and I came across this basket that's got a bunch of stuff in it that I've had up for a long time. I don't even think about it. It's got all these DVDs in there, so many DVDs, and I just, whenever I see it, it reminds me of that time before. Back when I left high school and I was feeling high with the Lord, and I was like, I'm just going to go tackle life, and then life was hitting me in the face. It really was, and I was struggling through, and I ultimately ended up just falling away. And instead of choosing to turn to God and other people for help, I was seeking comforts in other places. Those DVDs, I just would buy them constantly, and I would just sit there and veg out nonstop on video games and TV. I just didn't want to deal with my problems. I was sucking my life away. If you combined all the time, it had to have been months of just straight time of my life wasted doing nothing. And this was a downward spiral. I started getting really depressed. I started drinking before I was 21. And then you combine all that together, it just made everything worse. I started drinking more. I felt like I was drowning in it. I was smoking nonstop. I was watching movies, playing games to all hours of the night, and hardly getting any sleep. And it just continues to get worse and worse. Eventually, I start cutting myself. I'm just crying out. I have no idea what to do. I'm just so down and depressed, and it got so bad. I went too far one time. I passed out on the floor. I woke up, didn't know what had happened. Calling out to my stepdad at the time. I was in my trailer. No one knew I was there doing anything. That could have been it. I hate thinking about those times. Yeah, I felt so bad sometimes, and a lot of it turned to anger to God sometimes. I remember I drove out to Bassendorf Beach one time at like 1 in the morning. I don't know why I decided to do this. I could have yelled anywhere, I guess, but I really wanted to go there, and I just started screaming at God. There was no one there, so it would be less embarrassing. But yeah, I was crying out to him. I was like, what's going on? Why aren't you with me? Why isn't this happening? And I'm so glad of where I am now. He had a plan for me and a path, and I'm so thankful. But that's a crazy downward spiral we can go on, and this is what Israel is experiencing, 7 years of this. We all have to get to that place where we just turn to God. See, fear pulls us away from God. We get scared, and that's what's happening with Israel. See, they don't remember what they promised Joshua back then. And notice the words too, because I was doing the same thing, the finger pointing. Gideon said this. God is abandoning us. God left us. God is punishing us. There's no accountability here. This is all God's doing. What were we doing? We had 40 years of peace. What's up? No. Now going back to that funny reason why the angel of the Lord might appear as a normal person, You guys remember like those hidden camera shows, what do they call it? Undercover Boss? You know, where the boss would dress up like one of the floor workers and walk around to kind of see what's going on in his company. And why do they do that? Well, they walk down there in their suits with their clean shaven and and all their business briefcase. These guys would be sweeping up. They'd be shuffling papers around, stapling things. They would get their butts moving, and they wouldn't be talking bad about him either. What's Gideon doing right here? He thinks he's talking to a normal person, and he's whining about God right in front of him. Now, God knows all this. He doesn't need to go undercover to know what Gideon's thinking or Israel. But it means something when you start doing something like that, and then you get this reveal, and then you get that pie in the face. You get this realization, oh, this was something I was feeling and doing and saying. He's about to get the surprise of a lifetime here. So the angel of the Lord, here in verse 14 to 16, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Now I got to tell you, this is not on Gideon's agenda. This guy had some wheat threshing in a wine press he was planning on doing today. And no, this isn't what he wants to do. See, he's scared. He's alive. He's hiding out. We're going to find out later he actually has a lot of food saved away. He doesn't want to make waves. And if we're honest with ourselves, our desire, our own will, hardly ever lines up with God's actual will. It's always what we want to do first, right? Now, Israel, if they wanted to, maybe likely could fight away these Midianites, maybe. I mean, if you gathered all of them up together and they had this big hurrah, maybe they could do something. But this is not the time of Saul and David. We're like 200-300 years away from that happening. These guys are separated out. They're still in their tribes. There's no leader. There's no king. And so they're just being wiped over in this wave constantly. They really have to rely on God here. So God calls us to follow his will. He's got this path set for us, but we let fear hold us in place. He offers a way for us to move forward with him, but we have to trust him. I think we get comfortable in fear and worry. It seems like an odd thing. See, I know I hated the life I was living. I did not want to live like that. It was constantly on my mind that I wanted to change. But a lot of the things, there's this weird connection between your fear and this comfort that you give yourself. And it just seems like the answer to fear is to do this thing. And then this pops up and you've got to do this again. And this is back and forth, and it just puts you in this cycle. See, it's that terrible claw that fear has. It just digs into our life. We feel like if we change, if we do what we know we're supposed to do, we're not going to be happy for some reason. We're not going to be safe or comfortable. Things are going to get worse. Or maybe just doing something, it's not going to even matter. And I think that's one of the greatest lies, or the greatest fear, is that if we choose to follow God, it will be fruitless. And I know that's from the enemy. Now, like Israel, we continue to get in this pattern of these like bad actions, and usually we experience some type of consequence and that we end up enduring, and then finally we ask for help. Why do we take so long to ask for help? 7 years. 7 long years the Israelites were enduring the Midianites before they called out. Why? At least for the Israelites, I think they knew the answer to that. Or at least some of them did. I think they knew that the answer was that sometimes you have to give something up. And these guys did not want to get rid of their gods and their false idols, and we're definitely going to learn that here in the next lesson. There's a lot of things we ought not to be doing, and a lot of the times the things that's causing our problems is the things we need to get rid of, the things causing our hardships and our pain. It's like when we turn to God, it's like we're asking him, like, hey, God, we got these issues, we got these problems, we could fix it, get rid of it, and it's like we don't do anything. It's like God, do all the work, and then I get on the recliner and I kick the feet up. Yeah, sweep under my feet, come on. No, that's our expectation, and I know there are many of us, I do that, I have done that. And I think a lot of that times that excuse is we just want to hold on to those things that we're experiencing, that we're doing, that cause the problem in the first place. And it's uncomfortable, and it's scary, and it feels like there's no guarantee in giving those things up. You know, asking for the help and knowing the answer, it's this hard stop that's on this track. And sometimes when we get in these moments, we just need that little push. Little glimpse of God to help us move. And Gideon's going to get that here. See, he feels a lot of these types of things. And look at his response, his excuses. He's in the weakest clan of all the Israelites. And in that weakest clan, he's the least of his family. He's the lowest of the low. He's a nothing. But it's not the point. God's looking at the future Gideon, not the Gideon now. He sees the mighty warrior that he could be. And Gideon's not doing it alone. God wants him to do it with him. God wants us to work with him, and he's taking away those excuses from Gideon. And what's left after excuses? It's just doubt, I guess. Well, these aren't really good reasons. I don't know. I just don't think it'll work. He's going to take that away from him too. See, the Lord knows us to our core, and he knows what Gideon needs. Now, by now, Gideon realizes this is not some regular guy here. And, he's saying, that he is the Lord, and he's speaking with authority. So Gideon asks him here in verse 17 and 18. See, Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eye, give me a sign that it really is you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon's looking for a sign, and we're about to see that he does get it. Verses 19 to 21. So Gideon went inside, he prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour, remember when I said Gideon had some food saved up? An ephah is about 34 pounds of flour. And he's preparing that much here. This is a real special guy. So from an ephah of flour, he made bread without yeast, putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, and he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was on his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. You have the oak, you have the rock, you have the angel of the Lord appearing there. So awesome. Now Gideon knows who he's dealing with. I mean, some guy just made a bunch of fire from a rock, and this stuff was covered in broth too. This stuff is wet, and it just, boom, it's gone. And then the guy disappears. You better start listening. And it seems a little familiar too, doesn't it? Pastor Rich just went over Elijah. What did Elijah do? He poured the water over the altar, the offering, all over the wood. God does not have a problem doing the impossible. It's all possible with him. So now Gideon knows who's before him, calling him to action. See in Judges 22 to 24, when Gideon realizes that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace. Do not be afraid. You're not going to die. So Gideon built an altar of the Lord there, and he called it the Lord is peace. And to this day, it stands in Ophrah, the Abizrites. I don't know if it's still there. I didn't go and look. When they wrote it, it was there. I believe it. See, Gideon has now seen what he needed to see. He's ready. His mind's changed, his heart's changed. He's starting to get on board with God here. And God was willing to show him what he needed to see. Now, this is not going to be the last time that Gideon asks for a sign. He kind of gets into the habit of it, to be honest. And we should not take a note of that from Gideon. We should not be asking for crazy signs or even simple ones. But God is also not trying to hide from us. He's always trying to make himself known. Sometimes we just need to stop and listen and look for him. Yeah. So, and in desperation, when we call to him, he will make himself known, and likely not how we think he's going to show up. He showed up in a very interesting way here. Now, we're starting to see this transformation that Gideon is going through that I talked about. See, first we have this fearful, cowardly, low on the totem pole man futilely threshing wheat in a wine press, hidden away from the Midianites so that they can't find him. Then we see that God gives him a reason to start moving, to move from fear and start trusting him. And we also have this other kind of shift, this paralyzing fear that makes us stay where we're at. This fear of failure, and he changes it to this fear of the Lord. His excuses pale in comparison to who God is. God is so much more than our fears and our worries. But this fear of the Lord, though, is actually a really healthy thing. See, the fear of the Lord is a call to action. It's a call for change in what we do. See, Gideon, seeing the power of God, starts to trust him and trust what he says he can do. He's starting to build his faith up. He doesn't have to do this alone. God is with him. A fear of the Lord is a call to push aside our own desires, our own false comforts. A fear of the Lord is to believe that he can do all the things he says he can do. The Israelites forgot that. He's not that type of parent that says, I'm going to punish you if you do this, and then don't punish you. He fulfills his promises, but he also wants to call his people back to him. Now, it's still going to be uncomfortable. Not everything is rainbows and sunshines for Gideon, but that's okay. He's starting to experience peace. And Gideon has this renewing of his mind. Now, he's got a ways to go, just like I do, just like all of us do. It's a lifelong road that we go on. But the first steps are taken, and we can do the same thing. Now, here's what I would ask you. What do you fear? What's keeping you where you're at in some part of your own life? Are you stuck somewhere? Or do you feel paralyzed? Is there something distracting you from God? Cry out. Pray to him. I remember being paralyzed in fear, darkness, my own depression. My God saved me. He saw the potential in me, and he helped me to get where I am today. No, he's not done yet. He is not done yet. But our God is real. He is alive. And he works in ways we cannot fathom. And he cares for each and every one of us. Don't let your fear keep you from God. Take the risk. Drop some things that are distracting you or allowing you to feel comfort that is without God. Now, when we choose God and we get closer to him, we start to align our will with his. And he's got a plan for each and every one of us. I don't know what that plan is for any of you or myself, but I know that we can work that out if we stay with him. We just got to take that step and find out. You got to keep praying. You got to keep talking to him. You got to be in his word. He's not hiding. We constantly need to choose his will over our own. See, Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Now, I am really excited to get into this next step with Gideon. He's going to be making some really bold moves. He's going to be doing some confusing things too. God told him to do it, and it's weird. And we get the benefit of seeing this all happen and seeing how trusting God with our actions can lead to some amazing change. All right. Father, I just want to come before you and just thank you so much, Lord, for all these brothers and sisters that we have here, Lord. These people who desire you, Lord, who wish to live with you and act out your will, Lord. I just pray, Lord, that as this body of believers that we can move and help each other, Lord, by keeping us accountable, of encouraging others to seek you, Lord, and to go out into our own lives and spread your word, your awesome, amazing word, Lord. You are love. You are peace. You are everything that we need in our lives, Lord. And I know that there's so much you've done for each and every one of us here, Lord, that none of us can truly fathom the depths of that. We love you so much, and we're so thankful. Keep us away from fear, Lord. Don't let anything distract us from you, and keep us with you. We lift this up in your name.